The Art and Science of Wealth podcast, having an impact, leaving a legacy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Art and Science of Wealth with me, Steffi Baker, and Joe Milam. Today, we are really happy to have a special guest with us, Steve Thayer of Handler Thayer law firm in Chicago. And we're going to have a great discussion with Steve because Steve does M&A with family offices, and he has a lot of experience and a lot of stories, some of which he can tell. And as we talk with Steve today, he will outline some of the steps that family offices need to take to do ventures successfully. And we're just going to talk about a whole lot of other fun things. So, Steve, please tell us about you.
Well, thank you, Joe and Steffi, for having me. I appreciate being on the podcast and happy to share whatever we've learned, over the years. We've been at it for about 30 plus years and have really seen a lot of things. And I think the interesting thing about being a lawyer is that I don't know if you remember the movie Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino in, and they said, why law? Like, why did you pick, the devil to be a lawyer? And he said, it's the ultimate backstage pass. You get to kind of jump right into the backstage, see what's going on. And not everybody gets to see what we see because a lot of it just never makes it to the public eye. And there's a lot of behind the scenes things, but you jump kind of right into the boardroom, right where all the action is, right where the decision makers are coming together and making big decisions, and you're able to have an impact. And so, of course, in the movie, he used that opportunity to turn people, in a bad way. I'd like to do the opposite than Al Pacino and move it in a positive direction. But it's fun to be a part of the team that helps makes decisions that can change the world. I mean, you look at the wealthy people out there, it's the top 1% of the world, but that top 1% is behind everything. Every business you see, every company that's out there has some high net worth person behind it. Either they started the company and grew it, built it, or they invested in it. But just as you watch trucks drive down the highway, I think, oh, those are clients of ours. Those are people that we represent. There's a family behind them, and you pull into a McDonald's. I remember, when I first got out of law school, there was a guy in the office who represented some of the original McDonald's founders, and such a great story, just with the Ray Kroc family, but then all the other families that were impacted, the bun maker and the suppliers, and those are all stories of families coming together to make something happen. And so it's just fun to be a part of that, and have the privilege to help other people, do something with their wealth, create it, build it, and have a positive influence.
Well, I think I don't know if you saw the sort of the secondary mission in the title, "The Art and Science of Wealth: Having an Impact and Leaving a Legacy." That is literally our goal here, and that's what you just described perfectly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the legacy part is interesting. It's you have all this money. And the question is what are you going to do with it, right? I mean, you made it doing something, but you could sit there and you could just take some every time you need it. That will keep you fed and happy and take you to a lot of sporting events and other things, I suppose. But I think it's much more fun to have a mission for your money, to say, I got this pile of cash or stocks or bonds or wealth that I could use to positively impact the world. And, I threw out 5 different discussion points at a family office conference I spoke at during COVID, actually, right at the beginning of COVID. We're in Aspen as COVID is blowing up all over the world. It was blowing up in Aspen. We were having a family office conference. And I said, of these 5 global issues, I can't remember all of them, but one was education, environment, healthcare, sustainability. I mean, I just threw out some big things and asked families, what are the most important things to you? And ironically, education came out as almost the number one global issue that we need to focus on. And it kind of caught me off guard because I was thinking environment, healthcare, things that you see every day as being big issues, but education, took the day, and family after family went around and talked about our educational system and issues that they had with it, and what are we teaching our kids, and how is that impacting our world, and we need to overhaul it. And I thought to myself that's interesting that they see this global issue in education, but I thought more about it, and really education is behind everything. It influences what we decide to do and how we decide to do it, what our kids are going to go do and decide. And so making sure that we have a good educational system that's giving people, balanced training and good information, not biased information, so that we're not, educating and steering everybody in the direction that we want them to go versus maybe, the direction that they should go in. But those biases are built into the educational system. And I thought it was interesting, because I think there's a lot of positive ways. And in fact, from that conference, as people were talking, they huddled after the conference, they got together and said, we should do this. We should put together a program, educational, system, to help have the impact that we think we should have. And I thought that was an interesting thing to do. I mean, some of it will involve investing money, but it was just one thing that family offices can do to change the world, is have a more positive impact in the educational system. Because if we educated people better, from poverty driven areas to other areas, we could create new economic engines and have a sustainable economic culture. It's like the old adage, teach them how to fish, don't give them fish. And if we did a better job of that across our poor communities and areas where if they just knew what to do, they could help make their lives better, as opposed to we've got to pay everybody to get by, or we got to give away. I think that was really at the heart of the conference, and the sentiment was that we've gotten to this system where everything is free and we're going to give away everything, and solve the immediate problem. And I remember the story about a company that was making little food packs and sending them to impoverished areas and countries. And what they didn't realize is that they were putting the local farmers out of business because they were giving away food, and the local farmers could no longer make food and sell it. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like who would have thought? You're doing such a good thing, and they were bringing all these people together in warehouses, and everybody was feeling good about packing food, and they were shipping it to these countries, and we all went home and patted ourselves on the back thinking we did good today. And I'm like, no, you destroyed the agricultural business in these poor countries. They can't even make, and now everybody needs free food. Even the farmers need the free food because they can't afford to make it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So there's an example of how education, had we instead invested in a team of people to go train people how to create irrigation systems or, make food. I know that I'm on the Institute of Genomic Biology at University of Illinois, and the Gates Foundation funded a $50 million project to try to figure out how to make plants grow faster. Why? Because we have a feed the world problem. We have a growing population and we need to feed the world. And one way to do that is to make food faster. And so they invested in a project that allowed plants to, open and close through photosynthesis more quickly, because they realized that, a plant is very conservative. When the sun comes out, they're kind of slow to open their leaves, and then when the rain comes, they're a little, I think maybe they're slow to close. I don't know. But what they did through that research is prove that genetically modified, some people think that's evil, but if you genetically modify the plants, we can create a plant that grows quicker. So they did that, and now they're giving away that technology to developing countries. They're licensing it to other countries, where they can get some revenue to help, create, more money and economic, opportunity to help others. But it's a whole mission on, investing in how to change food production, through education. But all good examples of how you can have an impact. You got to find what area is important to the family, and then how to engage the family. And that's certainly more exciting than, just taking some cash and going to a Cubs game, every other day. And, you get bored. I can only play so much golf and go to so many sporting events before I feel like I need to do my part to be productive. So
I remember, and you might know this better than I, but I remember reading the Gates Foundation's annual report in either 2014 or 15. And I think it was their 10-year anniversary. Again, my memory is a little bit shaky. This is a number of years ago. But what they did in this report I read in this annual report was they did a bit of a mea culpa. They spent a ton of money over the last decade and realized we're not getting at the heart, at the core, one or two or three things that has a profound impact on multiple issues. Don't address all these individualized challenges and throw money at them. Get to the core source of the problem itself. And what one of their observations, at least back then, was you need energy, better sources of distributed energy, because that impacts health, it impacts education. And I'm principally speaking, I think, about third world countries that they were focusing on, because that allowed the female empowerment, because the women in these tribal cultures are the ones that are responsible for cooking the food, sourcing the water, cleaning the clothes, and then all the other issues about reproductive knowledge and also health knowledge for the family. And also their basic ability to spend time at night reading, having a light bulb available for these young girls to get an education in these remote villages. It was wonderfully profound, both honest mea culpa, it appeared, but also just really the science of understanding how can you have the biggest impact.
Yeah.
You don't have to try and solve everything. You solve a few things and let the self-determining behavior, the implication of that solution, let people help solve it on their own terms by leveraging that.
And then you solve the unintended consequences.
That's right.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was just going to say that, you get a bunch of people in a room, and we could do something or nothing, right? But, if you have good leadership and good leaders, and those leaders can educate people and provide direction, and that's what I think, money can help you do. You can help buy leaders and educators who can go into a mass group of people and show them the way and show them the path. I mean, every company does that with their employees, right? We got to have training and support to get everybody moving in the right direction. Every football, basketball, and other team does that. The coach organizes it. But imagine you just go out and start playing a game. Nobody knows how to play. We don't have any plays, the rules. We're all just running around on the field. Like, what's happening? Like, I don't know. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go this way. I remember coaching some 10-year-olds, and I said, like, go run 10 yards and then go to the right. And he just took off running. And I'm like, he didn't go to the right, did he? He didn't listen, did he? And his dad was there, and his dad's screaming and yelling at him, Joey, get back here. Listen to your coach, But it's basically about having organization and structure and education. And the more organization, structure, and leadership, that you have, the more we can get done as a society, as a team, as, whatever problem we're trying to work on. It starts by getting organized and providing some structure and education support to that effort, and I think people often overlook that. They throw money at a problem, think it's going to solve it. There's poverty. Let's go buy some fish and feed everybody there. I'm like, well, actually, but if we hired some educators and maybe we just bought some fishing poles, maybe give the fishing poles away, or show them how to make fishing poles, whatever the thing is. It's about leadership and education. And tying back to my, conference example, I'm like, these families they really were onto something. Education, is really the key. It's about educating the masses of what works, what doesn't work, so that we all do more of what works, right? And we help each other in these areas, as opposed to fighting and running around disorganized, like a team without a coach.
Yep, with the head cut off.
Right.
Would you just to sort of take a couple steps back? I know we jumped right off into it because there's so much fun stuff to talk about. Could you talk a little bit about Handler Thayer and sort of what your practice is and that sort of stuff, Steve?
Sure. So I met Tom, coming out of law school. I worked for Quaker Oats in their legal department as an intern, really working for all these different, areas, corporate securities, real estate, everywhere. And, I met Tom, and he was representing all these entrepreneurs. And I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go into business or law. I had a law degree and an MBA, and I thought, where should I take this? Because I was an entrepreneur at heart. I came out of college, having worked my way through, started 4 companies in college, doing all kinds of different things. And but when I met Tom, he was representing Blockbuster Video, the guys that were opening up Blockbuster Videos and Checkers restaurants and golf courses and developments. And I thought, wow, that sounds really fun. I could help people do all kinds of things. And I look back on it, I'm like, I really was a serial entrepreneur, and I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. It's just that I'm not always the one with the idea or the money, but I'm on the team and I'm helping make it happen. So our whole practice has been built on representing, typically entrepreneurs, family-owned businesses, grow and build successful companies. Sometimes they don't work out. You learn a lot from what doesn't work out, by the way. And sometimes they do. And the clients that really did well, ended up with a massive amount of wealth that we realized, oh my gosh, you should organize that a little bit better. If you keep it all in your own name, it'll be subject to estate tax. And when you die, you're going to pay a lot of money in estate taxes. But if you put it in a structure, you'll get some discounts and you'll be able to protect it a little bit better, diversify it among the family. So we really came up with a strategy that was modeled off of the old family limited partnerships that people were saying didn't work because they were done on somebody's deathbed to get a discount. And we turned it into a family office structure. And we started the country's first family office practice as a law firm because nobody knew what it was. They'd heard about the term family offices, but in the legal world, it was either tax and estate planning or corporate work that you were doing for clients. And we kind of put those two practice groups together and said, a family office is really, a way to organize your wealth with a management company, managing holding companies, where that wealth sits, much like you would have a venture capital manager and a venture capital fund, or a private equity manager, private equity fund or funds, that have pools of capital in them to deploy. And we ran around the country telling people, what a family office was legally, and happened to notice that everybody's structure was completely different. Nobody had a common structure, and everybody was all over the board. Some people actually had an office that they went to called a family office. Other people had virtual family offices, basically just a structure without any actual people in it. And we saw so much and learned so much that, we came back and really just started helping families, kind of modernize, their family office structures so that they work good from an income tax perspective, an estate tax perspective, an asset protection perspective, pull it all together. And then once we pulled it all together, we said, okay, that's a good structure from a legal standpoint, and I met a family office a few years ago, who wanted to meet and talk about the structure. He goes, but here's what I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about income tax, estate tax, and asset protection. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about?
And it hit me that what they want to talk about is, what am I going to do with my wealth? How am I going to make an impact? And how are we going to keep it, keep our kids from blowing it up their nose? And what kind of things are we going to do? And what are other people doing, that are best practices? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a totally different conversation. We need to get up to speed on that conversation. And so we started paying more attention at the family offices that we were going, family office conferences that we were going to and speaking at, and starting to listening to more of those presentations and listening more about philanthropy, for example, and over the years, what I learned about philanthropy is that as family offices were plowing money into giving away fish, they realized, that's not such a good idea. We should maybe do more impact investing, investing in things that, we might not get our money back, but it'll do something very good for society. To what I view as a more modern view is, let's go make some good investments that just happen to change the world and make things better. Let's go do things, because if we do that, we're going to make money doing it, and then we're going to have more money to do it again and again and again. Right? I mean, if you do impact investing and you get nothing back in return, or you just return your capital, great. I mean, hopefully you'll have capital left to redeploy. But if you really focus on investing in things that create sustainability and reoccurring revenue and reoccurring profits, then you can keep doing it. If you don't, then you're out of money. And then you got to go find new money to go solve another problem, and you got to constantly keep raising money to solve problems. Yep. As opposed to, it's like if you went and invested in a water plant and infrastructure in a developing country, and you created the essentials that people are going to need, and then you actually were able to create jobs for people, to have income to pay for utilities and services. Now you have money coming in for utilities and services and water, and you have money to go buy groceries, and, you have an incentive to farm and make food to put on a shelf because nobody's giving it away. And it creates this whole sustainable economic engine that makes society work. We know it works. We live in those societies across the country, cities and towns and villages. We have the model, we just don't think about it when it comes to, investing in third world countries, for example. We think we try to solve one little piece of the puzzle, and that's all it does. It maybe puts a Band-Aid, on that problem. and then as soon as the Band-Aid gets old and tired or gets ripped off, it starts to bleed again. And we wonder why. Well, because we didn't address the fundamental problems, or issues of creating sustainability.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you for the wisdom and the insight. That period of time where you went from really finding this real neat, optimized holding company, family office, legal structure with all those tactical benefits, to the time you started recognizing the psychological side of, I'll call that legacy.
Yeah.
The art of wealth is how can they further their legacy? You are a scientist, and then you became also an artist in understanding the psychology.
Right.
What was that time period from years? What years were that? How far back was that journey that you went through that learning curve?
Well, I used to say we started our family office group practice group 10 years ago, but I said that for like 10 years. So I think it was actually 20 years ago. 20 years ago when we actually created this family office group, or maybe 15. I don't remember exactly, but I would say another 5, years or so of just structure, and then I want to say maybe 5 years ago, it really hit me that there's more to the story, right? It's like you created this legal structure, now what? And so we started, instituting quarterly family office meetings for all of our family office clients, so that not only would we set up the structure, we'd say, okay, here's the agenda for the first quarterly meeting. And there's an investment committee. It's talking about their public and private investments. There is a tax and succession planning committee to make sure we've titled and moved our assets around in the most efficient way. There's a philanthropy committee to talk about what are the best ways to utilize our social capital. Do we want to give it away? Do we want to support different impact investing? What's the best way to make a charitable impact, and build goodwill for the family? And then family councils, what is the best way to engage the family, and what are the needs of the family? We have, whatever we have, a wife and 2 kids, or 3 kids, or 3 generations of kids. You just have to, figure out what the family, is going to do with all this wealth and how it's going to impact them, and make sure that you're addressing those needs. You can't just ignore the fact that, your kids are going to inherit lots of money in a trust one day. You got to engage them in a conversation. Like, what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to go to school? What is your goal and objective? And if you don't engage the family and they're not a part of the conversation, then there's a disconnect, and then there are issues, and there's always going to be issues with family, right? So, just having an issues list from the family council, what are our issues? And let's talk about them in our management committee meeting and see if we can help solve some of those things. Like, do we need a retreat, a family retreat, or do we need to bring in some outside advisors, or are there healthcare issues, are there drug issues, are there things that we need to address, right? Just like any company, has issues and should keep an issues list, so should the family. And, we now view the family office structure as a way to facilitate managing issues that come up for the family, whether investment, tax, philanthropy, or other issues that just simply need to be put on an agenda so they get addressed.
Well, again, just like that panel 5 years ago when I heard you speak, these are some of the insights that, again, very few people in the room really understood how profound some of your comments were. And I'm hoping our audience, our listening audience, both of them, they get it, because this is great stuff.
Can I ask Steve a question here? So Steve, then it means your firm has kind of become the consigliere. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, because I've got French and Spanish, but I don't have Italian. In the concept of the Godfather movie, where the lawyer knew everything, knew all the secrets, knew where the bodies were buried, took care of everything, do you have any stories you can about how you've, and in this role, how you've been able to guide a family or help them avoid mistakes, help them achieve something?
Well, we are in a unique position. Like I said, we got that backstage pass, and I'd like to think that we're the center of influence in a lot of situations. But what I've learned over the years is that I don't have to be the center of influence of the family and the decisions they're making. But what I can do is I can find that guy or girl. I can in any given situation, I hear the problem, I hear the issue, I go, I know somebody who can help you, and I do more of that than I do trying to tell everybody what to do, because more likely than not, there's somebody that knows it better than I do.
Mhm.
I learned that a couple days ago, actually. I always say, you think you know everything when you're 18, and when you're 56, you finally realize you don't. And I just turned 56.
There you go.
But there really are a lot of helpful people out there. And like one of the guys I met at a family office conference, Mike White, I don't know if you know Mike, but he works for a security firm, and the job that he's known for is being the agent in charge of the White House, for the last 4 presidents, everybody but Biden, really. And he was there with, Obama and Trump and, Clinton. And
So the agent, what kind of agent?
he was the Secret Service.
Oh,
He
Secret
was
Service.
the Secret Service agent in charge of the White House. So, what's interesting about that is you kind of got to know about everybody, that's in a room, right? And so I brought him into some situations where somebody was being defrauded, and we needed to get to the bottom of, where is the money going? And he'd pick up the phone and, and get on the phone with somebody to find where our funds are, freeze the account so that we could get them back, and he's the guy that I always think of in terms of due diligence and understanding, who you're dealing with. And one of the best practices for family offices, that I would just kind of throw out there is do your due diligence, not just on the deal, but on the people, and hire a firm, hire Mike or somebody like Mike, to check them out, because you can, these days, it's amazing what information is out there on everybody. There's a profile being built on you right now, if you don't know it, online somewhere, and they know who you are, and it's easy to get that information put together, and like, here's who you're dealing with, just so you know. I mean, you could decide to do a deal with them or not, but now there's no reason not to know, as much as you can about the deal you're investing in, and as much as you can about the people that you're investing or dealing with, so that when you get into something, you have a better idea of what the outcome is going to be, because you're dealing with some good people, but I think a lot of our stories are tied to people who got into deals with bad people, and where it exploded and everything went south. And there's a lot of gory stories, and war stories about people losing all their money or investing with people that were stealing it. I mean, the Madoffs of the world, right, are a big family office centerpiece conversation. A guy that was integrated into the community and everybody trusted him. The next thing you know, he ran off home. We've seen that times 5 or 10. And it's amazing how people just get, you meet somebody and you want to believe and trust him, but the best con artist is really good at conning you. He's really good at making you feel like he's your best friend that you trust and that you go way back with after spending 30 minutes with him, right?
Yeah,
And
con man actually stands for confidence man.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Confidence, yeah. They make
Confidence man,
you feel confident. And that I got that from reading an old Nancy Drew book.
Yeah, that's good.
Like old one. I'm like, that's because they used the whole term back then. I'm like, where'd that come from? So yeah,
Right.
Confidence, yeah.
little factoid, carry on.
Well, so people, I had a family office that was a real estate guy, and he said, Steve, the 3 most important things in investing in real estate. I was like, location. Before I could even get the third location out, he's like, no.
Okay.
People. And I'm
Ooh.
like, okay. He's like, people will find good deals. People will, do a good job at whatever it is in real estate you want them to do. But without the people, nothing happens, So, the emphasis on finding good people, doing business with people that you trust. If you look at the private equity world, their number one focus is people. Like, we need to find and back a management team. An idea is just an idea. Money is just money. Those 2 things don't do anything without the right people. And in all the deals that I've seen, come through our office, the difference of success and failure, depended upon the people that were involved. It wasn't just who had the best idea, who had the most money. It's like, who had the best people, and those people figured it out, and if they didn't figure it out, they ended it sooner rather than later, because it didn't make sense to go very far. But, my only expression that can claim to own is you can't lose if you don't quit as an entrepreneur.
Can't
So-
lose. Yeah, okay.
That was a good
So if you make a mistake, just learn from your mistake
Keep
and
going.
move on. It's
Yeah.
when you're done that, you've actually failed, but you can avoid failure if you just don't give up
Don't quit.
as an entrepreneur. And you'll see a lot of serial entrepreneurs who fail, succeed. I mean, I think Abraham Lincoln was one of those entrepreneurs. He had a lot of failures in his life, right? He learned a lot, right?
Won one election.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
He won one election. Yeah, he lost everything up to that point.
Well, that's, I think, the big lesson there in terms of best practices. Be mindful of your mistakes, learn from your mistakes, go into every deal and every situation and in every encounter with a person and learn from it. I was telling somebody just today, about how I tend to just say something and throw it out there. And I think to myself, did I really just say that out loud to that person? That was maybe a little too blunt. My partner, Tom, he always says, well, he's from Iowa. Give him some slack there. He's just a little too, blunt.
Little too direct.
I thought that was New York.
I don't know. I think, I like to think I'm just very honest with people, and I always thought that was good. Just always be honest with people and tell them exactly how you feel. And then somebody explained emotional intelligence to me because I didn't really know what it was a couple of years ago. And I said, oh, you mean I need to think about how they're going to receive the information? I'm like, yeah, no, that's important too. I'm like, well, I thought it was just about giving the feedback. There's the art of giving and the art of receiving feedback. And knowing what you're about to say and how it's going to impact the person and understanding who they are and what their personality is like and how they're going to digest that is important. And all the leadership stuff you can take and learn from and all of the presentations you can go listen and learn from, there's a global leadership summit that's great. Those are all good things because it's all about people and leadership and understanding people. And if people are at the heart of every deal and every success and every failure, the more you learn about people, the more it's going to help you in your investment world and trying to find good deals and good opportunities. Because you can go into a room and say, oh, you know what, this person, Patrick Lynch, he said it best, good team players are humble, hungry, and smart. You got to be humble because you got to learn from your mistakes, right? If you can't learn from your mistakes, you're arrogant, you're a bully, you're headed down a path. Everybody knows you're headed down right into a brick wall. They're trying to tell you that. You're not listening. You're not humble. And boom, guess what happens? You hit the brick wall, right? And you got to be hungry. You got to have this drive to want to make something happen. And that comes from doing what you really enjoy doing. If you don't really enjoy doing it, go do something else. And smart isn't just about IQ, it's about EQ. In fact, it's more about EQ, right? You got to be be able to read people and understand people, read the room, so to speak, to engage a team. If you're looking at a team and they're all looking back at you and you don't have a command over that room in a way that's positive, it's all going to go negative, right? A coach can give a speech in a locker room. I'm always fascinated by coaching, and it's, you see the coaches that are yelling and screaming at their players, and then they go out and they do really well. Like, okay, so that works. Maybe that works. Or then you see, Phil Jackson never screaming and yelling or anybody having wild success. So, just the art of
Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight comes to mind. Yeah.
There's different strategies out there for managing people and impacting people, and I think some of the modern view is it's so like, don't offend anybody, don't hurt anybody, don't, it's almost like don't give them any negative feedback because they can't handle it. Right. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm there, because the truth sometimes does hurt and sometimes you need to hear the truth, but, understanding, EQ and people and how to, work with people and develop people, and to get them on your team or off your team, is a real huge part of managing successful businesses. And I'm certainly not the best at it. Most Tom will tell you I'm not even good at it at all, but I do try to learn from my mistakes and I do try to get better every day. And, my goal now is to have a positive impact on somebody else every day, rather than come down on them and beat them up for what they didn't do right. if they don't do something right, I'm like, today I'm going to teach them how to do it right. And I'm going to give them the education and the skills they need, and the energy that will help them do a better job tomorrow. And I will not hurt and tear people apart, and bring them down, because that's not helpful. I've realized, but taking those skills, those people skills and leadership skills into any work environment, into any family, I think is critical, and you can never have enough of that stuff.
Well, I could go on for hours, but I know we don't have that much of your time, Steve. So we do have a few things. I'd like to throw some sort of rapid fire questions or topics
Sure.
at you and have you give us sort of your one line first reaction, what I call the Gladwellian blink first reaction. And you can be blunt and direct on this call, this audience. All right. In fact, please do. So what do you find of all the interesting tactical things and you've been involved with? What is the most interesting part of your work? Singular, when you think of the most fun you've had, whether it was figuring complex situations out or just the light in the eye of the families when they realized, oh my gosh, here's somebody I can trust and offload my fear over all this complexity to this person who I trust implicitly, this conciliere. What would you say is the most interesting part of your working with clients?
Well, I mean, the fact that there are so many different people, different personalities, different. Now, as I meet somebody in a new client, I listen. I try to listen as much as I can. Lawyers like to talk. We get paid. We feel like we get paid to talk. So we always want to talk. But I've learned that listening first and really understanding who is this person and what are they trying to accomplish and how can I help them, and how can I coach them? And if they're doing things that I know probably aren't the best, and I have a situation like that right now with, two business owners that are just, headbutting each other. And it's like, oh my gosh, he says this and that offends him and he backs away and he shuts down. And, I'm like, I feel like a psychiatrist now, because it is all about psychology and understanding it. And because I'm not, in the fight, I'm just on the sidelines trying to help and coach, I'm just a little bit more mellow and a little bit more balanced. And I think what I bring to the table in any given situation is neutrality and some, even when I represent this guy.
All right, I'm going to drop the flag on you there. I said one sentence or two. All right.
Oh yeah.
Tough
Like
love
I
here,
said,
Steve.
I get paid to talk.
See, he's still a lawyer. Okay, so then the follow on to that would be, Steve, what's the most challenging aspect of your work? What one thing do you find generally has you up at night, tearing your hair out, rolling your eyes, wishing you were the psychiatrist that could prescribe some meds?
People who don't listen to me.
Enough said. That's enough said. All right, I like this, Steffi. What are the top 3 tactical best practices? All right, top 3, bullet item, go. 30 seconds.
I would say do your due diligence.
Due diligence.
Be patient. Don't expect it to happen tomorrow, and be mindful. Learn from your mistakes.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right, so next question, and we'll give you a little longer than 30 seconds for this one, because we're asking for stories here. Can you think of your top 2 or 3 cautionary tales, again, that you can say that would help people understand, please don't, they did this, please don't do this?
Yeah, money doesn't make you smarter is what I would start it off by saying, and there are a lot of people who've made some amount of money and now they're the smartest people in the room, right? And they take it and they think everything they're going to touch is going to turn to gold. And it's just not true. You got to look back and figure out what was successful, in the last venture that made you all this money. And maybe you can learn something from that venture. But when you start a new venture, a new project, it's starting from ground zero and you really don't have any idea if it's going to work or not work. And we've seen some clients, just because the amount of wealth they've amassed, they think they can do no wrong. We had somebody that was worth $400 or $500 million. He was in the real estate business, and he had everything leveraged about 20%, or 80% leverage, and so he had 20% equity in all these deals, but he was worth $400 to $500 million. Nothing was ever going to turn or put him down. And then guess what happened? The market dropped 20%. Right. And so when the market dropped 20%, the bank said, We want our money. We're still protected. And he had to liquidate everything, sell everything, pay it all off. And, he was left with nothing, So $400 million a year evaporated. We watched another guy who was on the cover of, I think it was Fortune magazine with Bill Gates, and he was the fastest growing company in America, private company. Bill Gates had the fastest growing public company. And this is very public, so we can talk about it. The FTC came in and decided that, his business was a network marketing scheme. It was sort of like Amway. They were selling products through network of distributors. And, there was a judge in Nevada who thought that that was evil and that we were tricking people into stockpiling products in their basement to get to the next commission level or whatever it was. And she had literally taken, 10 or 15 companies down by saying those were deceptive marketing practices, shutting down the companies and freezing them. This is otherwise a multi-billion-dollar company that was operating all over the world, putting lots of people to work and giving lots of opportunity to people to make money. And she shut him down, and he ended up settling, and working out some deal, but the business went away. And I think somebody on the Federal Trade Commission, after the case was done, came to him and said, I want to apologize. I think we got the wrong guy. I think what we did was wrong, and that was the last case that judge decided. By the way, somebody picked up the phone and called a senator or two,
Right.
and they might have worked for Amway, and they might have said, "Don't let this happen." I don't know really what the backstory was for sure, but watching situations like that where everything is great, and then all of a sudden it's not. And we have clients now that have massive amounts of wealth all tied up in one operating company. And we try to tell them, something could go wrong with that operating company, and then you've lost 98 or 9% of your wealth. You might want to take some money off the table, diversify, and like, oh, no, everything's great. It's great. Like, okay. Okay. And that's largely every entrepreneur too. They've built this company, they're worth 30, 40, 50, $100 million, and everything's great. I'm like, is it? Like, would you ever put 100% of your assets into one deal? I mean, it just happens to be that they get to a point, so knowing when to take some money off the table and cash in some chips, it's like being at the gambling table, right? And you're betting on red, you keep winning, at what point are you going to take the money off the table?
Yeah, one of the key wealth preservation disciplines is your selling discipline. It is absolutely what you just summarized. I call that the selling discipline. When and why do you take money off the table so you can do it without regret? Even if what you sold keeps going up, that it was the right thing to do for you. That's a discipline I learned anyway.
I think Kenny Rogers had a song about that, right? Knowing to hold.
Something like that.
I was starting to hum that one. When to hold, when to fold. Yeah.
One quick thing. What do you think that this audience we're speaking to, high net worth, ultra high net worth, it doesn't, 1%ers, it doesn't matter. What do you think they fear the most? If you could put one topic, what do you think they fear the most?
Well, I'd like to think it's the impact their money's going to have on their family, and their biggest fear is that, oh my gosh, I won the game. I got all this money. And then now what? Now people are fighting over it. They're suing each other over it. They're blowing it up their nose. Money can create more money, more problems. Somebody said it once, and I'm like, what? I'm like, actually, it's true. The more money you have, the more stuff you get involved in, the more issues you have. And, it does not solve all problems. That's for sure.
No, they're first world problems. But there's still problems, and that's a lot of people believe, oh, if I just have more money, everything would be okay. No, you'd have a different set of problems at a complexity level that you can't even comprehend right now.
Yeah. Well, and look at the amount of drug issues and psychological and mental health and other things that are in every family office, because they've got money, they solve the basic money need for your food and shelter. It has been taken care of, right? You got that, right? Once you get food, sometimes when you're working hard to put food on the table, you're not distracted, you're not doing all the crazy things, you're just really focused and driven, and you don't have a lot of options, right? Now all of a sudden you have all the money, you can do whatever you want, and that sometimes is always all good, right? And so fearing that your money is actually going to create problems, as opposed to solve problems, I think is probably a big fear of the patriarch and the family that made it, because they thought they had won the game, and, it's not that easy.
Years ago, just to chime in a little bit on that, an element of that realization, what do the wealthy fear most? And you just pointed out something important, which is the creators, the wealth creators. If it's a large chunk of inherited wealth, I think the fears are different. And one of the fears that was revealed to me many years ago by one of our clients, old money, wife came from old Chicago money, husband came from old Wilmington, Delaware money. Won't be hard to figure out where that came from. She said, the wife pulled me aside one time and said, Joe, you got to realize when you inherit wealth and you lived your life because of trusts and the income available from trusts for parents and even grandparents. She says, our fear is losing the money because we don't know how to make it back again. And that was such an honest and authentic fear that really broadened obviously the context of how she reacted to everything. The fear of losing money wasn't just because it would sacrifice their ability to spend more money on the next holiday or trip or what you were referencing earlier. But in fact, it's even a more basal fear in that we don't know how to make the money back because we've always lived off of a pile of money that we weren't the creators of.
All right, there's the check writers and the check cashers, as they say,
Yeah.
And if you're the check casher, like all I know how to do is, cash the check,
Cash checks.
When our kids were little, we said they wanted something. I said, we don't have the money. He goes, Dad, just go to the gas station.
Where you could get cash back then. That's right.
That's right.
That's exactly right.
There's plenty of cash in there.
Yeah, before ATMs, you went to the gas station to get cash. That's right.
Yeah. To your point, I went to a private high school in Milwaukee. I had the great privilege of going to this place, and it's largely the old money of Milwaukee. So there, I'm third, fourth, fifth generation even, and it's been very interesting to see, as a teenager, what my friends and their families were going through. And now as we've gotten older, to see what their journeys in life have been like. A lot of them have trust funds. A lot of them don't have to work. It's a fascinating thing to see. And some are very concerned if they're younger and they're getting maybe multiple trust funds. Well, what do I do with this? My family, and this is common, Steve, I'm sure you've heard this one. I'm sure you've heard this one too. My family won't talk about money.
Yeah, I mean, you need to prepare people for the wealth that's coming, and you need to make sure and that's part of the family counsel's role in our little management company, is to engage the family and find out what's going on, find out what their issues are and what their concerns are, and what we need to do to help them through life so that they have a mission and a purpose in their life that they're happy with. And money can help in a lot of ways. It can help you get going. It can help you start a business. It can, pay for things that you need, but isn't going to solve the fundamental issue that we all have, is what are we doing here? And what's going to make us happy?
Why am I here?
That's it. Why am I here? And what am I supposed to do with my time? And,
Charles Lowenstein from St. Louis said, and very famously, I remember I've heard him say this more than multiple times way back when I was seeing him at family office conferences, but the family office has two jobs and two jobs only. One, to manage the money and preserve the money. Two, to help the members self-actualize. It's as succinct as I've heard it put. Yeah. Could I jump in and ask one more? I know we're going to ask some practical, tactical questions, but to kind of end this, I'm interested in hearing, so your female clients, if you have, how many do you have?
For sure.
Female and minority clients, what special problems, if any, do they face?
Well, good question. I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, female business owners, they're all struggling like the rest of us to make things happen. And, I think it is more challenging. It is harder. We do still live in a man's world where, they can make things happen more easily because they can pick up the phone and call their little network of buddies and friends and financing sources. I mean, the private equity world, that we live in is male dominated. And so it just makes it extra hard, minorities, women, the people who are not like the other people in the room have a harder time. They always do. And, that being said, generally speaking, the underdog works a little harder. I don't know if you ever heard of the play, The Run to the Litter, but the farmer picks the run to the litter of the dogs to be the sheepdog because he's going to work the hardest.
Work the hardest.
And if you'll find that people who are at a disadvantage sometimes are really the best ones in the room to solve the problem and to make it happen because they're the most motivated, they're the hardest working. My son and I started a new company to sell NFTs of college players. We went to University of Illinois to sign them up. And the first group to sign up was the women's volleyball team. We made one pitch. They're like, we get it. We love it. We're all going to do it. And they all signed up. They got it. I mean, I'm like, oh my God. And we went to the football team and they're like, what? What is it? What's an NFT? I don't know. They didn't get it. They didn't understand it. And they were too busy.
Football players, come on.
Almost as smart as hockey players.
Right.
Figure skater. I take pops at hockey players all the time.
So our goal is to try to sell $1 million worth of women volleyball NFTs, University of Illinois, and make a story out of it, and and make it really be impactful because in sports in general, men have gotten all the attention. Men's football and basketball, rule the world, and they pay for everything else, and it's been such a dominated sport with men that and you'll see now people giving more women's sports airtime, and put it on TV. I mean, we all want to see a good game. It doesn't have to be two men teams playing each other. It can be two women's teams. It's just about the story and the information. You get that out there, and you let people see it. They'll be entertained. Women's volleyball is an amazing thing to watch. It's exciting. I think advertisers are now getting more aligned with women's sports and getting behind them, getting them on TV, supporting the advertising efforts, so they can be on TV, and just giving them more attention because they probably work a little harder than their male counterparts in a lot of situations. So
oh, thank you.
Great question.
All right, Joe, let's kick it into our next segment of practical tactical market.
Yeah, so this is also just even more rapid fire first reaction of the public markets, both stocks and bonds.
Scary, I mean, I that's what I would say. That's the lesson, from the last week. When things are going up and up and up, everything's great and everyone's smart and everybody is making money. When things go down, it's your heart drops. It's like my wealth just sunk. That's the feeling we're sitting in right now, right?
ESG.
What's ESG again?
But that's a reaction enough. We'll leave it at that. Hedge funds. You have an opinion, a thought that comes to mind? Hedge funds.
I think hedge funds is a pretty broad term. It's like a way to make money when the markets are going up and down. And the strategies that are employed. In the alternative space. I mean, that introduced the family office to the world of alternatives. How to make money when besides just buying and selling individual stocks, right? And that's an interesting new world for families, and it's been around for a while now. Obviously, gained some respect. It's now picking the right managers that's key.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think again, you gave such great context. Do your due diligence. I mean, I think you already gave the instructions on how anybody should approach any of these assets that classes that we've got listed here. We wanted to cover and get your opinion on. Steffi did a nice job at sort of framing your comments about venture capital. That's the next topic. And then you've already touched on impact investing. So maybe give you some time really to give your insights on venture capital as an asset class. It fits all the things you talked about of value creation, wealth creation, potential impact, purposeful economic engines. Maybe talk a little bit about the industry itself, what it's going through. It seems to be going through a bit of a transition. And just offer your thoughts on the venture capital broadly defined, and really some of the things specifically you find favorable and maybe even cautionary tales.
Yeah, I mean, we're a country of entrepreneurs, right? With that have embraced new technologies and innovations, and we've got to keep doing it, right? We got to keep investing in new things and new ways to do things. I mean, when something's successful, somebody milks it and gets as much out of it. It's out there. We know what it is. A lot of companies, they go public and everything. The entrepreneurs disappear. Apple's a good example of you lose the entrepreneur, you stop to innovate, you bring the entrepreneur back, and you continue to innovate. But if we don't stop innovating, you're actually going down, right? And so I think in venture capital, is the opportunity to invest in innovation. It's to get behind the people that we don't know, the ideas that we don't know, and turn them into things that we'll know tomorrow. And if you don't do it, you don't know what you don't know. And families are in the best position to make that happen. They have a surplus amount of wealth. They can afford to take the risk. And if they do it right and they take, reasonable risk, there'll be a more than, good return. I think that it won't always work out. In fact, most of the time it won't, but when it does, it'll hopefully pay for all the ones that didn't. That's the model for venture capital. And, but if you don't do it, nothing happens. And I put venture capital, and philanthropy, sometimes hand in hand. It's like, you can go invest in the philanthropy initiatives and do good, and it'll help other people, or you can invest in venture capital. And you might lose that money, might not ever see it again, but more than likely one of those ideas will work. It'll change the world, and it'll create this sustainable economic impact, that we want, which is reoccurring revenue so we can go do it again, or change the world to make it more efficient or better, solve a problem that we didn't know, how to solve today, but we figured it out tomorrow. And it's hard to get your hands around that, because it's like, I'm investing in what I don't know, but if you don't do it, you're not going to have that wealth regeneration event that might carry your family office into the next generation. You'll just mathematically run out of money, because if you're putting it in the market and you're managing your returns, with taxes and wealth generation, generations of taxes and the spending that you need to sustain that family, it's like there's a math equation before it goes away. The really successful families have continued to invest, not just in the public markets, but in the private equity world and the venture capital world, place a lot of bets so they can have wealth generation events that will sustain the family for multiple generations.
One of the real specific examples on that exact topic, one of our friends that'll be a guest here down the road, he's got direct line of sight to some of the inside advisors to the DeVos family, the Amway family there. And they have set up a private equity division out of their family office. And that has been so successful. Their last fund, I think they raised $1.3 billion was their last fund. And their average returns on their private equity strategy is like 40% a year. They literally have families falling to themselves wanting to invest alongside them. Yeah. Turns out they're making as much or more money off of the economic engine of their private equity interests than they get from owning Amway.
Yep.
It's that equation, they did an elegant job of tipping the economic engine to not rely on the old family asset that created their balance sheet to begin with. It was really great.
And it's interesting to note that they did invest in Theranos and lost their money.
Oh, that's a whole different conversation.
Another story, but they lost, to the point of you're going to lose sometimes. That was a big loss, but they're going to keep going.
$100 million.
I think what you see in the family office space now, that they're trying to play in that private equity world. The Pritzkers are a good example of that here in Illinois. They basically were managing their own private equity group, doing their own deals.
What family?
The Pritzkers, JB Pritzker, JB and Tony. And they decided to create an investment advisor, spin off, $700 million or more, and then co-invest with other families. And so they set up an RIA to do that. But the difference is that it's their own money, right? They're investing their own money. And what you don't see a lot in the private equity world, you see a lot of managers investing other people's money. And so when you look at private equity, it's like, is this an other people's money fund where these managers get to decide what they're going to do with our money? Or do the managers have a significant amount of capital in the fund? I mean, every fund manager will try to put capital in their fund, but it's not the same as when a family office does it, because when you have the lion's share of the money in the fund, it's totally different. You invest it differently. You make decisions differently. It's not about just deploying the capital and getting a management fee and crossing your fingers, and hoping for the best. It's about, should we do this at all or not? It's a more long-term view. And the decision is just a different kind of decision when it's your own capital. I think you'll see, the family office backed private equity funds, not being as quick to make a decision, being a little bit more patient and, and kicking tires more than, investing because, gosh, it's their own money, where, like I said, it's other people's money and we got to put it to work. We just got to boom, 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 let's get a deal done, and let's get several deals done in this really short defined time period. Family office doesn't have that short defined. They don't have to deploy the capital in the next 12 months. They can deploy or not deploy. They can decide to deploy and then change their mind and then put it on the sidelines. That's smart money, doing whatever seems smart, as opposed to organizing money and being in a cycle, because that's just the cycle you're in. You're in this new 8-year cycle.
Catching a transactional momentum trade. I put it just in the simplified bucket of, you got a fiduciary mindset versus a transactional deal junkie mindset.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
really,
and a timeline. Either you have a fun timeline. This is the 5th year or the 8th year of the fund. We got to close and sell everything. Well, is it the best time to close and sell everything or not? Because if it's not, you shouldn't be selling it, right? So patient capital is what I hear a lot, in the family office. That's the strategic advantage of family office money, is that it can be patient, and there could be more of it if you need more of it, and if it's the right time to sell, let's sell it. If it's not, let's hold it.
Yeah. Steve, we are just right at an hour here of actual chatter, which is amazing. I knew it would go pretty quickly given the breadth of knowledge and experience you have. This is just a real treat to have you here. Some of the other things we'd written down we would hope to cover, you kind of did it organically, which was lovely to see. Do you have any questions of us?
No, I think it's great what you're doing. It's about the educational, aspect of what we talked about earlier. And, when families get together and learn from each other and learn from their advisors, it makes the world a better place, because we're not all just, working in a black box that, we can't see out of, thinking outside the box requires you to get outside the box and listen and learn, from people like you and Steffi, and, and hopefully some of the comments we've had are helpful. Yeah. I mean, and there's more out there, right? You can never get enough education, because it's always a unique perspective from a unique person who's got something to bring to the table. And the more of that you get, the more sound decisions I think you make, as a family.
Well, that's, I think, the title, Art and Science, the world of art, conventional art. It's not just that the Dutch masters figured everything out and then art just stopped after that, right?
Yeah.
Art is a organic, living, breathing process that requires even building on prior expertise and learning from maybe even some of the edgy practitioners.
Yeah.
And same thing with science. Science didn't end with Copernicus or with Galileo, obviously, right? I mean, it literally builds on itself with new knowledge and new experimentation and innovation, innovative approaches to old problems. And so that's what we're hoping to capture in this body of narrative that obviously you've just been a fabulous contributor for.
I have a question, for you guys, if that's okay.
Yes.
You guys all kind of mentioned like more money, more problems. I come from someone who doesn't have as much money, so I want to take your guys' take on. So, and I know it's not fun to not have a lot of money. So I'm curious, what is your guys' ideal wealth you want to have to live? More of a psychological question, but from you guys' all different experiences, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on what's the ideal amount of wealth you think you need to live, quote unquote, a happy life or a sustainable life.
Well, certainly home and shelter are big drivers. You want to be able to live in a house and feed your family and have the basic things covered. But even in that, it's like, well, where do you want to live and what do you want to eat? Because if you want to eat out every night and live in a nice house, it's suddenly more money. And I think we all pick a point. I want to live in this community and dine at these restaurants. Well, that's a certain amount of wealth. I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on you just to buy that house. There's a lot of kids that live in our community, which is a fairly wealthy community in the western suburb of Chicago. And they realize like, oh my gosh, I might not be able to come back to this community because it's expensive houses and expensive restaurants, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be happy. It's like, well, if you lived over here, if you lived in, central Illinois, you could have the same house I live in for a fraction of the cost, and and you could have a reasonable lifestyle. It's about finding a place that makes you happy, and figuring out what it costs to be there, and then go getting the job that you need to sustain that lifestyle. But don't put yourself in a situation where you have more money, more problem. You've leveraged yourself to get the biggest house you could buy, and it's just about, we don't need a lot to keep us alive and fed, right? I mean, you can have a shake a day and you probably look and feel a lot better than a steak from Gibson's. But if you like a steak from Gibson's, you're going to need a better job.
Well stated. Steffi, anything on your end?
Oh, boy. There's that study that says after $75,000, having a lot more money does not necessarily make you happier. But to Steve's point, it depends on where you want to live. I mean, I enjoy living in a nice house in a nice part of Salt Lake City. And that makes me pretty happy to live in this house. I think it's very, very individual. It's what's your number? My number for whatever, it's usually arbitrary. I'm like, yeah, if I could have any amount of money, I'd have 50 million. Well, how did I arrive at that? I don't know. Sounds good. But
Right.
it's up to you, and it depends on, there's more definitions of wealth than money. There's a bunch, and you have to balance all of those because, what do you value most? Having a lot of money, I've met people who have $1 million in the bank and a penny in their hearts. So yeah, it's really, really individual. That's why, and think about it and get educated as to how to run it. If either you're your wealth team CEO or your wealth team member, depending on how interested you are, and get great advisors like Steve. The great advisors are the linchpin, and those are get educated. Decide what you value and get educated to support that. That's my final word. Joe.
Well, and Nick is one of my colleagues, and he's heard me say this numerous times, but everything that Steve was describing, you're describing, falls well within the construct of the Maslowian pyramid, if you will, of the hierarchy of needs and motivations. And the foundational work is your safety and shelter and food. And then it moves up from there: community, ego, and self-actualization. The overlay I would offer to that Maslowian construct is the toolkit that is really captured in the Stoic belief system, because Stoicism itself is a mental construct to assure happiness, and money has nothing to do with it. In fact, it's just the opposite. You can take more control over your happiness by putting no value on externalities, tangible goods, or other people's opinions, or. It's the ultimately rigorous mental discipline that guarantees happiness. And money is just actually complicates your ability to. So in a visual representation, Stoicism allows your Maslowian pyramid to be really narrow at the base. So you don't need much in the form of, you don't need a big house. You can live very modestly in these tiny homes that are now taken off, right? And now becoming fashionable. Well, I think that's a healthy exercise, because it actually then says you're living outside the structure. The structure doesn't define you. Your lifestyle outside the structure is what defines you. Right? These are interesting constructs and trends to me, because that's very much in that Stoic belief system and narrowing the Maslowian base, because that's something we as individuals do have control over. Don't need a big house, and don't get caught up in, well, gosh, now my sister just got a bigger house, so I got to get even bigger one. That sort of keep up with the Joneses is a guaranteed losing proposition. There's always somebody with more money and bigger houses. Take the opposite tack. Work really hard, and the Stoicism is the framework to do so. So I would say my advice is define your Maslowian pyramid base as narrow as possible, and that way you're guaranteed to control your own happiness regardless of the money.
I've got a son who's 25 years old, and he's on his way to Paris right now, but not the way you would typically expect. He did fly over there, and there was a cost to that, but he's staying in these hostels where you share a room, our dorm room. Typically it's $10 to $30 to stay at a hostel. And he's traveling. He was in Portugal, he was in Central America, South America, and he's really traveling all over the world, because he wants to figure out, what he wants to do with his career and his life. And he's like, Dad, I can't figure that out until I see what everybody else is doing out in the world, and I'm not even sure I want to be here in the US. Maybe I want to be somewhere else. How do I know unless I spend the time to go find out what's going on? And he's got a lot of interesting stories of people he's met, but he's really living at the poverty level, because he didn't have a lot of money. He saved a few bucks living at home for a few years, and he took that money and bought a plane ticket, and hopefully he's got enough to get a plane ticket home. Otherwise, he will live over there for a while. But he's otherwise got an engineering physics background from the University of Illinois with a minor in math and computer science. So he's a super,
Okay.
super smart kid.
Wow.
Okay.
He'll figure it out.
He'll figure it out, right?
He'll figure it out. Well, Steve, thank you. Steffi, you opened it. I'll just wrap it up here by thanking Steve again, my colleague and co-host Steffi, Nick, our wonderful producer. Thank you for your effort in keeping us organized and keeping us going. And and for the audience, thanks for listening. I hope we're starting to get some folks that Steve that are really starting to listen all the way through to these. That just our first one, which was just Steffi and I. We had far more people listen to the whole hour, just us talking. So I suspect that we're going to have a lot more people listen to this whole thing because of you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Art and Science of Wealth podcast, Having an Impact, Leaving a Legacy. Edited and produced by Nicholas Peck.